Right, so this is the one maybe a lot of you have been waiting for, the palette knife technique class. So this is the palette knife. This is the one I use. This is the only one I use actually to do all the paintings in the gallery around me, all the originals. And it doesn't have to be expensive. This was about $7.50, made by a company called Talons, and it's a size 3015. And what's important when you're buying a palette knife is the flexibility in this blade. Must be really bouncy, springy. You can pay more money for a palette knife, but the steel be too thick and there'd be no give in that blade. So you need to have that bounce. I'm doing a demonstration today, which I wouldn't recommend you try at home, on tear off slippy palette paper. There we go. So normally you would be painting on a canvas which has a grain or a tooth that helps the paint stick, or adhere to. You know I'm left-handed, so this particular knife that I bought is a left-handed palette knife. If I put it in the right hand, it becomes a right-handed palette knife. All right, so there is a certain way to hold the palette knife. I'm doing it now. It's designed with a round barrel here and then a flat handle. The round barrel isn't there for a mistake or by accident. It's so you can turn fully with your finger and thumb. You can twizzle the knife, full movement from left to right. Naturally, the rest of your fingers want to just grab the rest of the handle, and it means you can completely move fluid movements with your hand, and that's important. I've seen many people hold it like a soup spoon. That shouldn't be done. It's like when you learn to teach yourself to play golf. We all have, you can do it wrongly. You're never going to hit a hole in one, basically, doing it the wrong way. So the problem with holding it like this, you don't do it because you can't get the underside of the blade flatter than halfway along. It bends. So it's maybe all right if you just want to do some little detail, but other than that, you use only the underside of the blade, the tip of the underside, or the edge of the underside. You never paint with a knife upside down, and you hold it like this so you can turn it and move your wrist. You can see clearly how fluid that action is. So I've got some oil paint in front of me. It doesn't matter what colors, but I prefer to paint in oils because you feel more the resistance from the paint when you're using oils as opposed to acrylics. Acrylics are like using margarine on toast. This is like using colored lumps of cream cheese on toast. That's how it feels spreading it around. So the history of the knife, we're not entirely clear about that, but we know originally it used to be sold as a mixing knife only, and that would not have this bend in here. This bend, this kink, is to keep your fingers up away from your other wet work. It was a lot flatter, longer blade, and artists in the past would use it to mix their paints on their palette, and then they would set the knife to one side. And then, doing brush paintings, that the paintings all look flat. They have no dynamic, they have no texture or highlights on top. So somebody decided, somewhere down the line, that a bit of paint left over, let's take that and just add it on top of their flat paintings, which gave some texture and another dimension to the finished work. And then ultimately, just like I do, and there aren't many artists that do this, is to paint an entire painting with just the palette knife, no brushes. The wonderful thing about the knife is that you can, you don't need mediums. There's no spirits, there's no linseed oil, there's nothing to clean the knife other than recyclable paper towel. So if I get paint on my knife, I simply take the paper towel, wipe it, and it's instantly good to go, pick up another color. Now you imagine if you've painted with oils, how long it takes to clean that brush out. And also, the other important thing that means you can keep on creating as you go, oils dry a lot in less time than acrylics do. Acrylics dry too quick to paint with palette knife typically. So oils, you get time to keep them wet for maybe 2 or 3 days and still come back to that painting. And the other wonderful thing is when I wipe this blue off here, you can take another color and put it opaquely on a dark one with the right pressure. You cannot do that with brushes. It would dig into the blue behind, and as you try and lay down the white, it would mix with that blue. So it's called wet on wet, this system. So the other beautiful thing is, of course, is that you can scrape off any mistake. So that's also good to have. Now, we're going to mix some paints now. I'm going to take just some white here and a bunch of blue. Just going to sit that on top of there. And I wanted to show you there are times, even though I want a uniform mix of color here, there are times that you can benefit from not mixing the paint. And it gives you a lot more streaky lines in your painting. So if I take this lump of blue and lump of white and I just start doing this, you can have a very quick seascape. So you've achieved lots and lots of lines without having to paint each one. But I want a uniform blend of colour, so I'm going to pile that back to the middle. You can see it's still quite unmixed. And you just scrape it up and push it down towards the palette. Pick up, squish down until you get rid of all those streaky lines. If you've ever iced a cake and you've put food colouring in that icing to change the colour, you'll know that you have to do the same thing. All right, so I've got rid of all my streaky lines now, and I'm going to deposit that paint in this top left-hand corner. The other great thing with oil, of course, is it sticks to your knife better than acrylics do. They tend to slop off your knife. Okay, so I've got my color that I'm going to use for my background. Doesn't matter about this because I'm going to cover it all. So wet on wet. So I ideally want an entirely wet background before I can start showing you all the other techniques on top of that background. So if you have iced a cake, you pick up your icing and then just like, well, spreading with a knife with butter on toast, you're going to spread it out very thinly, like so. And you're not looking really for a lot of texture in your background. This ultimately will become my sky in my scene. But I just want that very flat. And the important thing to note here now is that as I stroke from left to right, and I could do from right to left as well, no problem, is that your leading edge of your palette knife is ever so slightly angled up. For obvious reasons, that would be that if you had your knife completely flat, it would dig up paint in front of your knife as it went across. So ever so slightly angled up and not looking for any texture. You usually look for texture as you kind of come to your foreground objects. So just laying that out now. And that should be enough. Now I want to focus on blending. So you can see there's no texture there whatsoever, very flat and shiny. So wipe your knife, that's all you need, the paper towels, very environment friendly. Now I want to make a lighter blue because I want to do one shade into another. So I'm just going to mix a bit of white with this blue to make it lighter. Just take a bit more, like so, because I need to be able to do a blend or a gradient from darker blue at the top to lighter blue at the bottom. So there's my uniform color. And I'll pick that up now and just lay that across the other one. I'm going to need plenty of it. I'm just going to do a couple of bands of that. And maybe one more down the bottom. But the issue now that we have is that we have a very nasty join. We don't have a gradient or a nice blend of colours one to the other. So what we need to do is know the process to be able to make that travel up smoothly. So I don't want this horrible join. I want it to sort of have a nice smooth transition from one to the other. So you put your knife over the two colours, pressing down, and you zigzag along. So I'm just kind of sawtoothing over the two colours where the join is and just pushing up all the time, wiggling the knife up and down. And I'm mixing them already on the palette paper, and I've still got bumpy lines which I don't want. So the way to get rid of that is to start doing passes straight. So just keep doing this, and the more I do it, you can see that it's starting to just drift up nicely into the darker blue. So let's deal with fine lines. A lot of people say to me, how on earth do you get all those super thin lines like ropes, masts of ships, rigging, fencing, and so on? Well, what we're going to do is use only the edge of the knife underneath. So we're going to take ourselves a little flat area of paint. It's important that it's nice and smooth, that there's no bumps in it. There it is. I'm going to wipe the knife clean so I can show you the place where I pick up the paint. So using your finger and thumb, impossible to do this procedure holding it the wrong way like this. So turn it up so the blade is facing me. So that's the other thing. When I'm taking colour, I am not putting the knife blade bottom away from me and digging in, pushing away, because you haven't got a clue what you're picking up. You can't see it because that's in the way. So turn it towards you whenever you take colour. You can see what you're getting on the underside of the knife. So using the entire length of the blade, with the blade upright, I'm going to sit it fully in that paint, drag towards me and lift up. And there I have a roll of paint on the underside. Keeping my knife upright, you sit it on the wet paint below, and that's how you get your super thin lines of paint. So it's picked up some blue, so I don't want that contaminated. Pick another roll up, and people ask me, well, do you need to buy a bigger palette knife if you want to do thicker lines? Well, no. The idea is the more you angle, and again, that's why holding it with your finger and thumb there is so important for fine adjustments, is you tilt the blade slightly at an angle and you'll start to get thicker or wider lines. Like so. And that's how you get them thicker and thicker and thicker. So what you can do once you've mastered that one is you can start having a bit of fun by moving your wrist next along the way. So if I take another flat area of white paint, again, I'm digging a roll of paint on the edge, and you start upright, but as you come down, you flatten your blade and twist your wrist. And then you get this kind of sail effect. Wipe again because my knife's now covered in blue. Just do one more down here. Keep the blade upright. Flatten the blade and twist your wrist. And then another sail. So one thing to note, the palette knife is not for photographic realistic looking paintings. It's for impressionism. It's an impressionism tool. So as opposed to brushes where if you had white paint on your brush, you could go back and keep working this area until you got some changes in there. If you go back and touch anything that I've just done now with this blade, you're going to spoil what's already there. So it's knowing when to leave palette knife strokes alone. Don't be tempted to go in with a brush, like we do with brushes, and we're doing this. It's going to spoil it. And I often say, sometimes beautiful mistakes happen. That's what my parents said when I was born anyway. But sometimes they happen, and it's knowing when to leave them be. So that's covered that. So now we can do things like using the tip of the underside of the knife. So I've taken a little blob of paint on the tip underside, and we can do a sort of little flower petal. So there's one petal to the center of the flower and lift off. Now, every time, if I want white petals, I need to clean my knife because I have blue on the white paint. And I'm just going to go around with our flower and just put a series of petals in. And I am getting a lot of texture in now. So one more there. And again, you'll see that I'm turning my canvas around, or sorry, my palette around, because you can get better control if you're pulling towards you always. You know, it's like anything in life. If you're letting go, you have less control. So away from you, you're letting go. Towards you, you have control towards your body. It's very good, the palette knife, for doing things like roses and tulips and so on, but also this kind of flower, little daisy I'm doing now. And there it is. So if I now lift this up, you may be able to see how thick that flower is, the texture there. There's a lot of paint going on there now. All right. So let's give ourselves a little pink center, shall we, to our flower. So we're going to mix some other color. And again, I just want a little blob on the tip, underside, and then we can just lay that in there. So if you want a stalk or a stem to your flower, we've already covered that with this technique here. So another question that people ask me is, well, how do you get such graphic shapes or windows, rectangles, squares with something of this shape and size? Well, let's take, for example, a sort of Mediterranean style window. So I'm just going to get some dark color, doesn't matter what. And I'm taking another roll of dark paint on the edge of my knife instead of white. And what we're going to do is we're going to move up here and we're just going to sit it on our wet paint, slide right and lift off. And that gives you a rectangle of dark color. Now, if you want shorter windows, you take the same roll of paint, you wipe some of it off, and that means your windows will then be that height. So if you want taller windows, then what you have to do is take a roll of paint, do one stroke and lift off, move down and do another and lift off. If you want wider windows or wider shapes of squares, you keep dragging longer before you lift off. So if you remember at the beginning, that little seascape we did when I didn't mix the colors, we had lots of streaky lines in that scene. Well, I want to do the same because I want two shutters, one each side of this window. And instead of painting every single louver in the shutters either side, I can achieve an impression of those louvers by not mixing the color. So if I take a little bit of pink, a little bit of blue, and I just dab them, I'm stippling now here, and I pick the unmixed paint on my knife. What you'll achieve when you drag it in one direction is lots and lots of lines. There they are. Same if I do it this side. You get this kind of impression of shutters. I'm not quite happy with that, so I'm going to do over it, and that's the other wonderful thing. That will do us. And then you can start using the techniques you've learnt, like the fine lines, to enhance that window. So let's say we're going to take a small roll of paint again, and we can put ourselves a little center bar in our window there. Then we can do a couple of cross ones. There. And then we can do a little window box below our window and just swipe down like that and leave it. Again, I'm not bothered about how it looks. And then we can take ourselves another color And now I'm going to have it on the tip of my knife again, and I'm just going to touch that wet blue paint. And then we're going to get this nice little sort of window box. So you have that cool little effect there. So that's how you would perform that. So you can imagine my painting of Portofino in the corner that took me 2 months to paint. Count how many windows are in that. And that's the system that I used for that painting. So what we're going to do now is throw all these techniques into a little scene. We're going to have the sky at night over the ocean. We're going to have full moon in the sky with some misty clouds around. We're going to have the horizon below. We're going to have the moon reflecting and twinkling on the ocean to the seashore down here. Then we're going to put a bunch of rocks in this bottom left corner, and we're going to have a palm tree heading out over the ocean. So that's combining all those techniques now. So think furthest away first. Sky is done. There it is. Next in the scene, moving forward, will be the moon and the clouds. So we can put that in now. So let's just start putting those clouds in here. I've kind of gone over a little bit with my window, but it doesn't matter. Let's add a few more clouds, maybe here. That will do us. Just darken the top. And then I can pop a moon in, so I just need a blob of white paint for that on the tip of the knife. I'm going to sit the full moon in about there. Round shape's very tricky, and I just need to tidy that up. That will do us. So there's our moon, and then we can do our horizon. So I want a very thin roll of paint on the edge of the knife. This time I'm going to go horizontally. And very often I take a deep breath doing this. I don't breathe, because you want it straight as a ruler. And there it is. So there's the horizon. And then we take some more paint on the edge of the knife. Underneath my moon, I start just touching the wet blue paint with the white paint. And you start getting this kind of shimmering effect in the distance. And I'm going to carry on now with that and come down to the seashore. So let's just put a bit more there. Twinkle, twinkle. Take a bit more. Start spreading those a little further apart, getting some bigger waves in. That will do us. And now we can do our palm tree. So the palm tree trunk will be this theory here. Take a big roll of dark paint on the edge of the knife and decide where our palm tree is going to live. So the center of it, I'm going to put about there. So I'm going to start flattening the knife as I come down and bending it towards the bottom left-hand corner. And there's my palm tree trunk done. No more to do to it than that. Then we're going to start putting all the dead stuff in the center of our palm tree. So just dabbing it like that, because we're going to grow coconuts in this area later. Now I can do my palm tree leaves. So I'm just going to take a bit more blue up here, just fill that with wet background. I'm going to need to paint over that area. There we go. And now, again, like we did with the sea at the beginning, like we did with the shutters on the window, we're going to use unmixed paint to get the effect we're after. So stipple, so lots of lines, but not a uniform mixed colour. Pick a bunch of that up, then put your blade in the centre and fan out. There's one. Then we go again, just make our way around. Don't want to hit my moon. And we'll just finish by doing all these leaves. Another one down here. Just getting a bit of oil on my fingers. I'm going to remove that. And then I'm going to work my way around over the top, doing the same theory. So we'll go this way. Maybe one more down here. So there we have our palm tree. So instead of me having to paint all those individual palm fronds, you can get the same effect or the impression by not mixing the paint. Then we can finish off in the bottom left-hand corner with a bunch of rocks. So rocks, the palette knife is excellent for doing rocks. Typically they're jagged, sharp, but if you're doing boulders that are smooth, then you do a different kind of action with your blade. But this time, I just want a whole bunch of rocks down here. So I'm using the edge of the knife just going to fill this area in. And then I can highlight those. Just a little bit where the sea's been catching it, or the moonlight. Like that. And then we can do just a little other type of tree if we've got room in this left-hand corner. So I want a tree trunk this time, so I'm going to use that idea, the line getting thicker at the bottom. So take a roll of paint and just bring your tree trunk where you want it, down there. And then I'm going to start by stippling. So pressing down with the wet paint on my wet paint below and just doing this and sticking down and lifting off. And it gets lots of peaks by doing that. You're forming lots of texture. So as you lift up with a knife, you're getting a lot of peaks. And then we can just take some lighter paint and just start by highlighting the right side. Just going to tidy up that part there. And then finally, you can have a bit of fun by loading the knife with more than one colour. I'm just going to do that now, scrape that away. And let's see if I can get this right. Bit tricky, this one. Nope. Gonna have to start again. So let me get a blob of white just about there. That'll do. So take my red, take my white, and take some blue. And then you can do a nice little flag. You can just do one sweep and do a flag. The one thing I will say, and I don't want to appear like I have a large head, I was a Walt Disney artist for 20 years, so a great artist already. I've been doing palette knife for over 15 years now, so I've mastered that. What I would say to you now is I make this look easy. So I wouldn't want you to go ahead. I would love you to have a go, but perhaps not straight away on your beautiful paintings if you've never held a palette knife before. So hopefully this direction has, inspired you to have a go and see all the things that are possible with it and beyond. But I just don't want you to spoil your paintings. There are some of them where you have trees and leaves and so on and rocks, where it will really lend itself well at the end on top of your brushwork to add some enhancement or embellishing. But, we have plenty of palette knives for you to have a go. And if you want, just have a try on a spare piece of paper to the side, just to get the hang and the feel of it. I'm going to leave this out here for you to have a look at in real life. And thank you for watching. Thank you.